many ways, my college experience was a realization of just how much this world expects us to have everything figured out, or at least to pretend that we do. You no sooner pick a major than people begin to bombard you with that dreaded question, but what are you going to do with that? 4 years were plenty enough time to realize that the world's perspective aims at knowing who you're going to be, more than it aims at truly knowing who you are. For me, this is the difference between those from Blumhardt's quote, who go around wearing their Sunday best, cover model souls with painted faces, and those who are dressed for work, flecked with the smatterings of nitty-gritty daily life. I think I came into this year of Amate dressed in my Sunday best, with my eye on the person that I could be, rather than courageously vulnerable, willing to be seen for exactly who I am, faults and all. As a result, I became something of a self-development junkie, never satisfied with who I was at present, never willing to fully recognize my gifts and talents, because all I could see was just how full of holes and cracks that I am, how much this part of me needs mending, how much that part of me needs tweaking, and how little that part of me holds up to its potential. I realized early on, during orientation, as my new community began to trade out their Sunday dresses and suits for muddy shoes and well-worn t-shirts, just what my greatest challenge would be this year. I would have to slow down and reorient my perspective so that I no longer had my eyes set on the woman that I could be and God's will as it would manifest itself in the future, but rather seeing myself clearly and honestly and living that authentically. Seeing God's will, not in who I would be, but in who I have already become over my 22 years of life. I would have to recognize myself as God's beloved and be patient and loving towards myself, as I had rarely been before. Acknowledging, in the words of Kara Olenick, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. I had to let go. I knew I had to be active in my waiting, so I chose to live that paradox, to lose myself in service of others to find myself. Nowadays, because of Amate, my active waiting looks like dancing like a child with a grown man in the middle of Brookfield Zoo because I took the time to know what it takes to make his day. My active waiting looks like deconstructing and broadening my understanding of service to include the slow, laborious cultivation of trust and relationships with elderly who don't always remember me from one day to the next. My active waiting looks like pushing myself to the limits of my concept of love, to admit that I don't have all of the answers, and inviting my community to share their truth and reality with me. My active waiting looks like acknowledging the ugly habits I thought I'd left behind as they buck and kick their way into my new life, and allowing my community to hold me accountable for their effects on our shared life. My active waiting looks like realizing my own dignity and worth as I yield to my community's boundless love and affection. My active waiting is not perfect. It's messy and wild and sometimes a little crude, but it's more me than I have been for quite some time. All it took was the letting go and giving in to the kind of faith that believes God's will is here and now, not just tomorrow. The kind of faith that believes that you shouldn't search for the meaning of life, but for the meaning that you can give life. You, exactly as you are, dirty work clothes and all. Anytime my expectations of myself and future-focused perspectives start to cloud my vision, I pray that this year will fortify me in the kind of faith that believes in the promise of today, and encourages me to find the meaning that I can bring to the hand I am dealt each day of my life, whether it be at work, at home, or in the quiet of my own heart. I expect my self-knowledge to be a lifelong journey, a waiting game of its own, but not a passive one. It will be spent as intentionally as possible, like the disciples awaiting Christ's coming. For me, Christ's coming will be like God tracing out a constellation from the brightest stars of my life, and delighting in watching my face as suddenly it all comes clear, as suddenly all of my I don't knows and perhapses and will sees spell out a full portrait of who God created me to be. Until then, sure, I'm waiting, but I'm not waiting in passivity. Rather, I'm pouring my heart into the people around me each day, deconstructing the world's claims on my understanding of myself, and being courageous enough in my vulnerability and faith to trust that my dreams will find me and my stars will align as best serves His kingdom, one day at a time.